winter, so I like doing these lives outside, but damn, it's cold. Anyway, the topic for today is I'm going to go through what Dana White said at the post-fight the press conference of UFC 302, and I'm going to explain why I not think, but I know he's wrong. You know, there's a lot that I feel like I've went through, but maybe I didn't explain it in detail properly. So I just felt like, you know what, this is a topic I'm interested in. So let me give my opinion on this particular topic. Um, it's kind of weird how he said what he said, man, especially on a pay-per-view or rather a press conference that was headlined and won and basically saved by Islam Makhachev, um, which like it was crazy to watch. But let me start from the beginning, right? Basically, if you're not aware of what's happening, after UFC 302, Islam Makhachev obviously won via submission after an incredible fight against Dustin Poirier. Dana White was asked a question by a reporter, basically, who was asking where Dana White ranks Islam Makhachev among the best lightweights in history, right? Dana White went on and just, um, I don't know, just said some unfounded things, or rather things that were not called for, about Islam Makhachev for whatever reason. He felt like he had to say those things, and I felt like it was without justification. Um, for the most part, I feel like it's largely because he's trying to promote John Jones. John Jones has been going through a lot of scrutiny recently, with the MMA guru calling John Jones gay, um, with the MMA community basically revolting against John Jones and basically being upset that he's fighting Stipe Miocic as opposed to the actual contender, who is the person who's holding the interim championship, which is Tom Aspinall. And that's a more compelling fight than him fighting Stipe, who's old and his last fight was knocked out by Francis Ngannou. Like, it's not even, I don't think people are excited for that particular fight. They might have to stack that card in order for people to watch that fight. So I feel like one of the biggest reasons why Dana White went on that rant, it was basically to try and promote John Jones, right? Because it's not like Dana White likes John Jones based on what I've seen. I don't know them personally, but like based on what I've seen, there are recordings or emails that were released that show the things that Dana White were saying about John Jones. They went through a fight when around the time Francis Ngannou was champion, they were having contractual arguments, and John Jones was actually on the verge of leaving the UFC. So I know they're not like the best of friends. There was a point even where Dana White was calling John Jones scared of Francis Ngannou. Um, so for me, it just seems like he's trying to promote the fight, but it's sad that he's doing it at the expense of Islam Makhachev. So let me explain why I feel like he's wrong with regards to the statements he made. Right, the pound for pound. I don't know why people don't understand this, which is probably the easiest thing to understand. It seems like a lot of people misunderstand or rather confuse the idea of the greatest of all time with the idea of pound for pound. You can be the greatest of all time, right? There's no argument, but you can't simultaneously be pound for pound best. If we're going to do that, then we might as well bring back Habib. We might as well bring back Anderson Silva. We might as well bring back GSP and all these type of things. They should also be pound for pound, the point of pound for pound, we're talking about currently active fighters, right? In today's time, we're not talking about 10 years ago or 5 years ago. How much for a teeth? Wow. Exactly. Pound for pound is different than legacy. Yeah, people are very confused about what pound for pound is. Pound for pound is who, if ever everyone was the same size, who would win? Like if everyone was the same size and they got into a fight, who would win, right? So a lot of people are confused that they like, and I don't know why this continues to happen. For whatever reason, people think pound for pound means greatest of all time, and that's not what it means. And if you compare John Jones's skills today with Islam Makhachev, look at the early parts of the fight between Cyril Gane versus John Jones. John Jones was losing on the feet, right? Go back and watch that fight. If John Jones did not land that takedown, he was going to lose that fight. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why John Jones is not willing to fight Tom Aspinall, because if he can't take Tom Aspinall down, he's going to lose. You don't have to listen to my opinion. Go back and watch that fight. John Jones lost that fight on the feet. However long, even though it was for a brief moment, if you look at how John Jones was fighting on the feet, it was horrible. It was horrible, but probably maybe that was his plan. His plan was to become Jilton Almeida at heavyweight and just focus on grappling, and which is not a bad plan. But we're talking about pound for pound. Islam, in my opinion, today, we're not talking about John Jones at light heavyweight. We're talking about John Jones today, the 36-year-old or 37-year-old John Jones. We're talking about currently active fighters today. If you compare the skills of Islam Makhachev, he can do what John Jones does on the ground, but he can actually stand with the best strikers in the UFC. Alexander Volkanovski beat Max Holloway 3 times. Islam Makhachev beat that guy twice. He was the one who actually ended Alexander Volkanovski's streak, and that fight was largely on the feet, right? Even though the fight was controversial, but the fact is Islam Makhachev was able to last for a very long period of time on the feet with Alexander Volkanovski. He he actually stood with Dustin Poirier for almost 5 rounds basically and submitted him, which shows he's a good striker. Because he couldn't get the takedowns against Alexander Volkanovski, he couldn't get the takedowns against Dustin Poirier, but he was actually winning those fights, right? The Alexander Volkanovski, I know it's controversial, but the fact is he won, and it was competitive, and he landed more accurately. If you check, even if you check the statistics, the only advantage that Alexander Volkanovski had in that particular fight was volume. Other than that, it was basically Islam Makhachev. So we're talking about the most complete fighter in the UFC currently. And unfortunately, that's not John Jones. Maybe if we're talking about John Jones a couple of years ago, potentially yes. So that's why, if today, let's imagine this scenario: John Jones and Islam Makhachev was able to make heavyweight, was the same height as John Jones. In my honest opinion, I wouldn't pick John Jones. The 37-year-old John Jones would never beat Islam Makhachev today. Islam Makhachev is 32 years old. So just imagine a world where Islam Makhachev is the size of Jalen Turner. I think Jalen Turner fights at lightweight, right? Just imagine a world whereby Islam Makhachev was the size of Jalen Turner, right? Jalen Turner, if he bulks up, he can actually make heavyweight and be a decent heavyweight, I think, right? So imagine Islam Makhachev was like the height of Jalen Turner and could go to heavyweight. If that happened today, I'm not talking about the light heavyweight days of John Jones. I'm talking about today. If today John Jones is like 37, 38, Islam Makhachev is like 32 years old. If those two in today's time were the same age or were the same size, I would not pick John Jones. So when we talk about pound for pound, we look at current activity or rather activity, most recent activity. If we look at their last fights or rather the fights within the last 4 years, Actually, I like the last 8 fights. Or rather, yeah, basically, let's just say that the past 4 years, since maybe 2020, right? John Jones has had, I think, about one or two fights since 2020 in the past 4 years. I think John Jones has had like, what do you call it? Two fights, one or two fights, yes. On the other hand, Islam Makhachev has had eight, I think. Yes, Islam Makhachev has had 8 fights in the past 4 years, while John Jones has had two. Right? Let's look at the quality of opponents. Number one, John Jones, within those two fights, he fought Dominic Reyes. I think so, yeah. He fought Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes arguably won that fight. And on top of that, Dominic Reyes is not even in the pound for pound list. The second person that John Jones fought was Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane is horrible on the ground. Even I'm a big fan of Francis Ngannou, but Francis Ngannou cannot wrestle, and he was able to just dominate him on the ground. So we can't say that those are quality opponents. He arguably lost the fight against Dominic Reyes, and Cyril Gane is a striker, basically. So the fact that he finished the fight that quickly is not even surprising. Now let's look at the quality of opponents that um, Islam Makhachev has had. Obviously, in the beginning, it wasn't that great, but it was decent fighters. It was Drew Dober, I think it was Dan Hooker, it was who was it again? Bobby Green. It was when did he fight Aman Sarukian? I think Aman Sarukian is somewhere there. I don't know when they fought, but yeah, around that period, I think. And then there's let's just count the most recent ones after that, right? Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira was number three pound for pound when Islam Makhachev beat him. Not only that, Charles Oliveira was on a 11 fight win streak, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he was on an 11 fight win streak. That's the first quality win. We're not talking about someone who's just a good fighter. We're talking about someone who's number three in the world, pound for pound fighter, right? And it was on an 11 fight win streak. That's number one. Islam Makhachev beat him to get the title. Number two, if you remember, Dana White last year, February, was promoting the fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev as a champion versus champion and for the number one pound for pound spot. Because at that time, Alexander Volkanovski was number one. The crazy part is John Jones had won a fight that year, and Dana White was busy rallying or saying things like, "Oh my God, like Alexander Volkanovski deserves to be number one, like he's the best," and all these type of things. He wasn't saying the things that he was saying right now, which is insane to me because he wasn't saying all these things last year, and we're talking about a year where John Jones was actually active, or rather not active, but actually had a fight, right? Why wasn't he saying this last year? Because John Jones was actually won the title last year, so he could have said all these things last year, but he didn't. He actually promoted the fight and said this is for the number one pound for pound spot and all these type of things. And fine, Islam Makhachev won. And despite the fact that Islam Makhachev won, Alexander Volkanovski retained the number one spot. I'm not going to dispute that and all these type of things. Let's just leave that. But keep in mind that Alexander Volkanovski was ranked number one pound for pound and was on a 10 fight win streak, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around that time. So we are talking about a 22 fight win streak that Islam Makhachev ended for the number three ranked pound for pound fighter, which is Charles Oliveira, and the number one ranked pound for pound fighter, which was Alexander Volkanovski. That's quality wins. And even the second time that they fought, even though it was on short notice, Islam actually knocked him out, and Alexander Volkanovski, I think, was ranked around three pound for pound, right? So those three, only those three fights, or only those two fights. Let's ignore the fact that he fought Dustin Poirier probably at his peak potentially, because like I've never seen Dustin Poirier defend that good, right? Let's ignore that and let's just focus on Charles Oliveira. Let's just focus on Alexander Volkanovski. In the past 4 years, Islam Makhachev has had 8 fights, right? Let's ignore all the other six, right, and focus on only these two that I'm mentioning right now and compare them with the two that John Jones has had in the past 4 years, which is Dominic Reyes and Cyril Gahn. Are you going to tell me that beating two champions, we're not talking about ordinary fighters, two champions who were on a streak that was over 10 and ranked in the top three of the pound for pound list? Are we going to compare those two people with Dominic Reyes and Cyril Gahn and say those two people are equal in value or in the prestige or at the with with regards to the level of skill when we're talking about who's the best fighter in the world? For me, it doesn't make sense. We don't even have to discuss this any further. Islam has more quality wins. Islam is more complete as a fighter. Um, for me, uh, yeah, wow, that sounds weird when it's typed in the comment section. But yeah, for me, John Jones, unfortunately, especially with the things that he's doing currently on in with regards to avoiding fighting Tom Aspinall and all these type of things, I honestly don't feel like he deserves to be called like pound for pound best in the world at this particular point in time. So that's basically my view on why I feel like Dana White was wrong in his view. Obviously, I can understand that he's trying to maybe promote his fight. The pay per views are probably tanking because no, like people are now like getting a little bit upset with the type of promotion that is being done for John Jones, and the fact that he's not even being stripped, the fact that he has to continue to be undisputed when the interim is being defended, which is crazy for me. So I guess maybe he was trying to do that, but it doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't make sense. Even if John Jones were to get two more wins, there are no longer any quality heavyweights that I feel like would qualify for John Jones to ever be considered pound for pound. There are no more quality heavyweights except Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is, in my opinion, maybe Curtis Blades. I'm on the fence about that, but there are no longer any quality heavyweights that I feel like John Jones can beat and actually think he's pound for pound. Imagine if Islam then goes on and beats Aman Sarukian and goes up and beats Leon Edwards, who's on a 12 fight win streak, I think, or 11 fight win streak, somewhere there. Imagine how crazy that would be. And you still want to argue that Islam is not number one. Like, it's crazy to me. I will conclude by saying this. Pound for pound is not legacy. Like, greatest of all time is a separate discussion from pound for pound. People need to stop confusing these two. I saw Dana White doing the same thing, confusing legacy and arguing using legacy to say John Jones is the best fighter in the world based off of what he's done for the sport. You know, so if we are going to use that argument, then Conor McGregor is the best fighter in the world at this point. He was the first champion to be double champion. We can't look at, you are amazing picking UFC, brother. Thank you. I research my picks, man. I make sure that my subscribers get the best picks possible. And I enjoy it. I love the challenge. I love the thrill. But let me get back to the topic. So I honestly don't feel like people understand the concept of pound for pound, and I hope I have managed to try and clear this up. The greatest of all time is a separate topic. Pound for pound, we're talking about who is number one, the most well rounded fighter. Number two, if ever these people were to fight today, we're not talking about just what they have achieved, right? Who you've beaten also counts. And I mean, you can't list any person who's done what Islam has done in recent memory, right? So it's basically how well rounded you are. Obviously, a small portion of it has to do with what you've been, how, like your activity also counts. Like how many times do you fight regularly, and then who have you been fighting, and how have you been beating these people? Um, and I mean, Islam is by far pound for pound. Even if John Jones has 3 fights or 4 fights next year, I don't think he can get to number one unless maybe he goes back to the light heavyweight and beats uh, Alex Pereira. That's a quality win because that's a former middleweight champion and a light heavyweight champion. That's a quality win, you know. So, but other than that, man, if he stays at heavyweight, he shouldn't ever get that number one spot ever again. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on the topic. I love and appreciate all of you guys. I have, like they're saying in the comment section, I work hard on my predictions. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe. I'm going to do my final predictions and breakdowns for UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Imavov. Probably tomorrow or the day after that, I'll see. But yeah, just be subscribed and turn on your notifications so that when I go live, you get a notification. Um, until next time, I love and appreciate all of you guys. Deuces.